Welcome back to the Good Talk, the show where we discuss what's hot, what's grot, and everything in between in the wide world of Warhammer. It is Thursday, the first Thursday of the month, which means while these tactic sessions are normally only for the members, we'd like to welcome everyone into the session. And these are, of course, moments where we talk about events, we talk about tactics, we talk about the meta, we do list reviews, things like that each and every Thursday before our Thursday game. It's a great time, so we'd love to have you as part of the team. My name is Adrian. I'm joined today, of course, by Brian. There'll be Leva, and behind the keys, it's, well, us.
It's actually just us, yeah.
It's just us. What is up, everybody? Welcome on in. It's great to see all these shining faces. I mean, we've got a whole slew of new captains, so I want to say a big thank you to each and every one of them. We've got, thank you, Scriptoris. Welcome, Alex Raxputin, Zadok Aspinall, Corey Pearson, Sammy Cook, Benson Daniel, Bout Ree, and Dara Carroll. Welcome, everybody, and thank you so much for becoming captains. Check out all the behind-the-scenes content. There's more than ever. It's a beautiful time. So, we're here today. I haven't even had all my coffee. Brian
You
does
haven't,
this.
yeah. I've like started sipping my coffee.
Yeah.
I haven't actually.
A little sip, but you had an early morning long drive.
Yeah, I don't like super hot coffee though.
Wow.
I don't like it when it scalds my tongue, so it needs to sit. Like I have it in like a thermos.
Why do you have a thermos then?
Because it keeps it hot for like a longer period of time.
Right.
I don't have like only an hour to drink my coffee. Because then it gets to that point where like once it starts to not be scalding hot, you get like 20 minutes to drink it before it becomes cold.
That's fair.
And I don't want that.
You know what? All right, I'll take it. Well, welcome in, everybody. We're going to be talking about Teams events today. We have done streams about them before, and our kind of journey into trying them out, learning about them, and honestly coming to really love them. Today, it's going to be a bit of a guide around how it works, recommendations, our experiences, things like that. We also are coming off the back of a Teams event this last weekend where we, spoiler, should I spoil how it ends?
No, you can't. You can't spoil it.
Okay.
You can't spoil it.
It was quite a ride. So we're going to take you through that. We're going to go through all the pairings and talk about that. If you have more questions, of course, let us know. We can't cover every single detail. So if there's a detail you want to know about, just let us know. We'd love to hear from you. So welcome in, everybody. Saul, sorry to hear that your dice went, Adrian, on you. But I still like your list. I think it's great. So that's a ton of fun. And what's up? Shane was part of our team. Monikir won. We didn't get to play, but I saw you. I recognize game. Yeah, Monikir was out there hunting knights, and boy, there were a lot of knights.
Yeah, there were. Oh my god.
We were amateurs. We only had one of our teammates as a knight.
Honestly, we probably should have had more.
Frankly, yes. Cool. Well, folks, let's just dive on in and get into it. So first off, we want to start talking about Teams tournaments and what they are. What does it actually mean when we talk about Teams events? A lot of people, we use this term, but we're not entirely sure what it actually means. So let's take a look. Boom. All right, so when we're talking about Teams events, what does this mean? Usually, well, so I'll say this. Yeah, usually it's teams of either 5 or 8, and that is for the purposes of how the matchups gets paired, essentially. If you do other numbers, it gets wacky, it gets weird. This is just what is done, right? Usually we're talking about the WTC format. That is the primary Teams format that is used around the world, originated in Europe, and is kind of everywhere now. You still play individual games. This is a team sport. I don't even know equivalent. I mean, I'm a gymnast, so it's like gymnastics. It's not all three of you on the balance beam at the same time.
Right.
It's you do your individual things, you get your score, and that contributes to overall team score in that event or that round or whatever. Close enough. It's a little different, but. And then you play with differential scoring, which means the amount of points in which you win or lose by actually does matter, and it's not a strict win or loss kind of ratio. We'll dive into that a bit more. And then finally, there's a detailed pairings process by which you and the opposing team get matched up. Yeah. Anything I missed about the fundamentals?
I don't think so. With the pairings process, you have a lot of control. You can have a lot of control over what you and your teammates play, also what your opponents play into. So there is a lot of like strategy that goes into it, and it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do if you are inexperienced in it.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a really cool thing to learn, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. I've been doing Teams events for the last few years now, and most of the time whenever we do pairings, I'm involved in the process of doing the pairings with my captain. So it's always a great time, and it's always very stressful. So if you have a captain that does the pairings for you, thank them, because it is a very, very difficult job to try to get everybody what they want. But understand that, again, it's not easy. So
It's a really, really difficult job, and it's an important job. So yeah, definitely thank whoever is willing to put themselves out there. And big thank you to Brian for being our captain and our pairing person. You did phenomenally. I was convinced. Literally after round one, again, we're gonna go through the whole thing, but I was like, wow, this guy, you get this process. It's pretty amazing. So that is teams tournament. What it is, just kind of generally speaking. It's like wrestling. Okay.
Yeah, it is like wrestling. I was going to say like wrestling, but
Yeah.
I figured not a lot of people wrestled. But it's very
I
similar
don't
thing.
know
Like
who
you're on a
does
team, you wrestle individually. Like you obviously not everybody's wrestling at the
Right.
same time. It's a very. I used to say when I was in high school, it's the loneliest team sport you'll ever play.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is kind of the same thing.
You know what? That checks out. I'm into it. So that's just broadly what teams is. Now let's talk a bit about army selection, what that means for an event. Generally speaking, in teams, you are not allowed to repeat books. It means some slightly different things in different time periods of Warhammer.
Yeah.
And it means every once in a while there's an exception to this rule. I've seen it done. But generally speaking, you cannot repeat books. So this means, for example, if you are playing Knights, for example, and you want to have some Imperial agents, then nobody else can have Imperial agents units, and you certainly cannot play them as your primary army. Same if you have Demons allied in. You got those Nurglings in your Chaos Knights list, you cannot have a Demons player now. And you can imagine the impact that has on the meta.
Yeah. There are some exceptions to this, like Adrian was saying. So things like Imperial Agents specifically, you can't take more than one instance of any codex. However, some of the units that are within that codex exist in other codexes as well, but they're different.
Yeah.
So like the Imperial Agents Grey Knights, for example, are different from the Index Grey Knights. So therefore, if you were to take Imperial Agents Grey Knights, you could also take faction Grey Knights in the same team because they're not the same units, data sheets rather.
Yeah.
In the same way you could do with sisters, right? So like our Knights player had sisters in his army, in his list. You could also take sisters as an army separately, which we did. So again, it's make sure that you're aware of when you go into an event if they're going to allow that to happen, if they're not going to allow that to happen. Most of the time they will because that's generally speaking the rule by and large, but just make sure you're aware of it before you go into it.
It's a good thing to check on, and it's another thing to really kind of rotate your brain around because it's so easy to forget that this is an extra rule. You know, you're used to, I always have my Calidus, or I always have this, and then you're like, you're getting close to the date and you realize one of your teammates also has the same thing on their list and someone has to change. So make sure that you include that discussion early on in the process, so figure out what the event allows, and then kind of discuss who needs it, who wants it, things like that. You got to share the toys in this one.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is interesting, and it kind of leads into the next point, which it generally allows for more builds, right? In singles, you have to be able to take on, if you're really trying to compete, every army in the game. You have to be a take on all comers because you don't know who you're going to play against, things like that. In teams, you're part of a team, and you're going to have some control about what you play against. So that means you can play armies that maybe aren't the best, or you can do a build that is a little bit more extreme, or maybe in some cases, honestly, less extreme than what like the meta pick is, right? Because of that. That does come with a big asterisk, of course.
Yeah, 100%. I think the biggest asterisk is in a 5-man team. So when we're talking about the size of the events, usually it's 5 or 8. 5-man teams, it's pretty much there's going to be 5 armies in the game that are very good, and everybody's going to have some combination of at least 3 of those armies. In which case, you need to be able to deal with those 5 armies. Like you as a team composition need to recognize, like, all right, for us, for example, Death Guard, Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights. Those 3 armies are going to be repeated across this event indefinitely. We're going to have to face those at some point, probably multiple times.
Right.
So we needed to make a team composition that could deal with those types of armies. And then the rest of our armies that can't really deal with those, we can skew into something else. So again, that's for a 5-man team. Generally speaking, there's 5 armies. You know what they're going to be. You can plan for them. 8-man teams is where it gets really interesting, where it gets much more complicated for the pairings process, because that's when you can start doing things like skew, where you have, I'll just take triple Baneblade.
Yeah.
It's not good into most things, but into the things it's good into, it's really good into them, you know? So like things like that exist in those types of metas. When you have 8-man teams, also, like Adrian was saying, you can take bad armies, and make them good in that setting, and they can perform really well for that reason, because you have much more control over what you're actually playing into.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said. Let's see, checking out chat. Raphael says 2v2 live stream would be sick on the channel. That would be sick, actually. We did it one time with Liam, and it was chaos. But it was a lot of fun, honestly. And yes, unfortunately, with Marines, if you're based off of the Marine Codex, generally, this is one of the ones that sometimes changes in different editions, but you that's it. You don't get any other Space Marines unless they're completely separate, like Grey Knights or whatever.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah.
Like
So like
that.
Blood Angels would take away from generic Space Marines. Blood Angels would also stop you from taking Dark Angels, stuff like that, just because it's all the same essentially.
Yep. Exactly.
They pull from the same units.
So you know that is absolutely a factor. And then finally, each player can take on a role. So we talked about the differential scoring. Losing by just a little bit is fantastic. It is almost as good as winning. In fact, it generally is because of the differential scoring. If you just barely lose or you just barely win, that's probably going to be considered a tie in the overall ranking. So you don't necessarily need to be always the highest scorer. There's often going to be meta monsters, things that nobody wants to play against, which we'll talk about. And sometimes someone just needs to jump on that grenade and try to score as many points as possible, or frankly, just make it so that someone else doesn't have to play against it, and then they can score high. There are moments where you are trying to get as close. You're trying to close the differential as close as possible. And that's the only goal there. There's times when you're trying to spike it as much as possible to get as many points, perhaps because the rest of your team has tougher matchups, things like that. So you can kind of tailor to individual roles and themes even before you know what team you're going up against.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And then finally, the pairings process. Very interesting. Actually, I think I want to talk about differential while we're here.
Yeah, I think we should.
So let's go over to, this is the WTC document itself. Boom, boom, boom. Let me scooch this over for y'all. So you can see here how the scoring actually works. And Brian, maybe you want to walk us through this one a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So in an individual games for teams events, there is 20 potential points that you can score. And you and your opponent both share these points.
Yeah.
So you're still scoring your game 0 to 100, just like you would play a normal game of Warhammer. But again, the difference in that score determines how many overall game points you'll actually get. And so if you look here, so the difference in the victory points, if me and Adrian are playing a game and we score 90, or if I score 90, he scores 95, he technically won the game. However, if we look at the differential here, it's still 0 to 5, which means both of us will gain 10 points because we have technically tied that round. So nobody wins because the differential is not big enough. And as you start going every 5 after that, so 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and so on and so forth, you get Adrian will gain 1 point for every 5 he's above me. I will lose 1 point. So that's how you increase that differential. It's really hard to get a 20-0 because you have to be winning by 50 points, which is a lot of points to be winning by. If you put that in perspective, if you scored 95.
More than 50 points even.
Yeah, more than 55, or more than 50 points. If you scored 95 and I scored, I don't know, 46, right? Now you get a 19-1. Like that's really hard to do. So those that can get it done, very impressive. But yeah, so you guys share this 20 points, and then at the end of it, whatever that total score is, so like let's say Adrian scored 13 points in our game, which means I would score 7, just because again there's only 20. He contributes 13 points to his team, I contribute 7 points to my team, and then every other game that's going on does the same thing, and then at the end of the round, we add up all of our totals combined, and then again it's a differential, which you're not a huge fan of at the end of this, but it's a differential again to see who actually wins the round overall. And so in order to win the round overall, you have to have a 3-point lead. So you have to score 53 team points in order to win the round, which means your opponent cannot score 48 points. They have 47 is like 47, 53 makes 100. That's how that works. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. I really like it. I know, again, you're not a huge fan of like the differential at the very end. You think it should just be total points, which is an interesting idea.
I still have the same complaint. You have the differential here, and then you have the differentials of the teams, and it just ends up becoming more and more and more abstract and kind of hard to track that. But it is what it is. It is what it is, and it is interesting because it means fighting for every point matters. It means that losing is still valuable. You can be really excited about your teammate that lost 7 to 13 or 8 to 12 because that actually is only a 4-point gap there between the two, and that's great. You know. And again, we'll have some specific examples a little bit later on this. So that's the differential scoring there. Again, if you have questions, let us know, folks. Pairings. So the way this works is teams get paired up much in the same way that players would get paired up in a singles event. At first, it's random usually, and then it's like Swiss pairings, effectively. So teams get matched up, first of all. Then there's a drafting process where the teams go back and forth presenting certain players with their armies. The defender, who's usually the first army that you're putting down, often gets the choice of 2 opponents. So there's a bit of choice there that they have. And then terrain is, I've seen it played both ways. I've seen it done as a roll-off. I've seen it done as the defender gets to pick. But generally speaking, there's this culture of, in teams events, you have several different types of tables. I think usually you want like 5 or 6, right?
Yeah.
And those have different degrees of cover to them. So you have, like in this event, it was 1 light board, 1 heavy board, 3 medium boards. And the medium is obviously not totally equal. And this is fun because it also acknowledges that there's many different ways to play the game, and different armies want to play differently on different boards, and it just adds like another angle that, yes, can complicate things, but ultimately kind of makes for a more interesting process.
Yeah, definitely. And it also allows you, especially, again, make sure that you know the type of turn you're going to be playing on when you're going into the event, because that will allow you to make lists for the event, just like we talk about all the time. Even if you're going to a singles event, know the turn you're going to play on. But in teams, it allows you to have these armies like, hey, maybe I build to be the first defender in every single matchup, and when I win the roll-off, I choose the light table every time, and I'm just going to take a parking lot of guns. Or maybe I do the opposite, where like I'm only going to have melee, I'm only going to charge. It's going to be a really high-pressure list, and I'm going to take heavy every single time, right? So like I won't get shot, I'll be able to jump from cover to covers. Like it allows you to play these armies that are not necessarily optimized if you're going to take them into a singles list, but in this format, it works really, really, really well.
Yep, absolutely, well said. This event was WTC terrain, so fairly dense, fairly covered, theoretically. Of course, there's still the light boards and even the medium boards. It's not that bad. But
yeah, there are pretty. Actually, the medium boards have pretty big firing range.
They do. They really do. But it certainly can factor into what list that you're playing, things like that. So let's walk through an example with everyone. Let's talk about some. Oh god, I lost it. It's all gone. Do we want to do? Do you want to do our first pairing just as the example?
Yeah, yeah, we can do it.
Okay, cool. So here we are. We're at the event, day 1. Oh, day 1. Round 1, we get paired against Snake Boys.
Yeah. So these are the team compositions. So on our team, we had Sisters, we had Grey Knights, we had Guard, Death Guard, and Imperial Knights. So fairly standard, I would say. The only weird one, I think, is actually the Sisters and the Grey Knights. I think those 2 are kind of like the strangest. Guard makes sense, Death Guard, Imperial Knights. But like these 3, or the 2 at the end, Death Guard, Imperial Knights. So you'll see those repeated basically everywhere. For sure. And then the team we're playing against, obviously, Death Watch, Grey Knights, Thousand Suns, Chaos Knights, and Imperial Knights. Now, there were only 3 Grey Knights at the event. We paired into one of them. I was obviously one of them. But yeah, so this was our first round pairings. And whenever I had sat down to do the pairings, I wouldn't even talk about matrices. We've touched on this before, so I won't go too in depth with it. But when you're doing a team event, it's pretty important to go and have a discussion with your team, some type of discussion with your team. And hopefully write stuff down so that way you can remember, because it's very easy to forget things in the moment. But to have just a list of things that your armies don't want to go into that your armies potentially do want to go to. So what we like to do, we call them matrices. I don't know if that's kind of just like what everybody calls them.
Matrix.
Yeah, I guess
it's like I mean, it's a graph,
like a spreadsheet.
Basically, a spreadsheet.
But either way, so what we did, we went through our 5 lists and was like, hey, these are all the factions in the game. These are what we think we'll do into these games. Like, I think this is a bad matchup. I think this is a good matchup into these particular armies or whatever.
I think this is like neutral / kind of tie territory.
Yeah. So this, I think, is the most basic form of it, right? Ideally, what we would have wanted to do was to go into each individual team once they release the lists, so that way we can kind of tailor those matrices to the individual teams. Like, hey, when we play against this team, these are all their lists. These are my matchups in this team. We're going to this team. These are matchups in this team, because those particular matrices would not match like the big overarching kind of just generic one. They, generally speaking, shouldn't match because you're trying to tailor it to these specifically.
Yeah, it's always going to be stronger if you can dial it in. You know, I think there is sometimes the temptation to be like, oh yeah, like if you ask Bridger is really bad about this whole process, and you can't trust anything he says. He's like, oh, I'll like 20 everything.
It's like, that's not how that works, Bridger.
That's not. It's not helpful.
Yeah,
it's like
it's super unhelpful.
But generally speaking, like, okay, if you're going against like NIDS, right? Your odds against a Vanguard list versus a subterranean assault versus a invasion fleet might be very, very different, right? So being able to kind of parse it out a bit more is helpful. Like, we just did a high level in this event. We just did the basics for the armies, and so it's again our like 5 members, and then all of the factions just going straight down, and we basically just did like a color system. It was like green, yellow, red, basically.
Yeah.
But then when we went to do the actual pairings, we would have more in-depth discussions. Okay, look at this list. Okay, it's this version. This means this. But it gives you or your captain, your team, just a quick reference to be able to see.
Yeah.
And if you want to take the time to kind of parse it out more specifically, that will always be better.
Yeah, of course. It's like whenever I do stuff on my team, and I guess we didn't even mention like the actual event that we went to.
Sure.
So the event that we went to was put on by Battleshot Gaming. So a friend of ours, Chris. So this is the Sonoma Teams Tournament. So it did happen in Sonoma, which is north of us.
Yeah.
And there were 12 teams, I want to say. So a good amount of people. That's what,
Yeah.
60 people that were there at this event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was like not huge, not small. Not tiny.
Yeah, like it was a good amount.
It's fine.
I was going somewhere with this.
Yeah,
and
hopefully.
I lost it. I lost it immediately. Anyways.
It was a great event. It was well run. Everything was on time. A lot of space. We were up in the Veterans Building, Veterans Center.
Veterans Hall, yeah.
Yeah. So that was sweet.
Yeah.
So the matrices, that's the event. Let's talk about pairings.
Yes, let's talk about pairings. I did have a point to what I was going to say. I just don't remember what it was.
I'm sure we'll get back to it.
Yep. Anyways, okay, so when I sat down to do these pairings, it was the night before. We had already gotten our pairings.
Yep.
Which was nice. We actually got them like a day and a half
Yeah.
before the actual round started, which was really, really nice. But I didn't sit down and do this until like 1 in the morning.
Of
so I was
course,
just
yeah.
like awake and in bed, and I was like, I might as well do this before I get to the
You're
event.
stressing me out. Oh my gosh.
So I took the matrix that we did as kind of my guidelines. Now, it wasn't perfect, as we mentioned before. Like, the lists changed the way that we want to actually pair into these matchups, but I kind of got a really good sense for what everybody wanted to go into, right? So, like, a big thing for pairings isn't just this army is going into this army, it's also how confident is that player going into this army. And based off that matrix, I could see, okay, this is kind of where everybody's head's at. And so I had made two plans for this list, or for this pairings. One of which was if they defended with Thousand Sons first, and one is they defended with Imperial Knights first, because that changed basically everything. When we were looking at this matrix, or when I was looking at this matrix, the Thousand Sons were an army that we really didn't have an answer for. Nobody was super confident into the Thousand Sons. So knowing that, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of my opponent. Our matrices should be mirrors. Right? So if our matrix has a green matchup somewhere, their matrix should have red.
Right.
And vice versa.
Right. If everyone's correct, then the decisions should be clear on both sides, right? Or if you're at least in the same mindset, then everything should be like, oh, we both are in agreement that this army should do well to this army, right? So if it's a good matchup for us, then it should be a bad matchup for them.
Right.
And so kind of operating from this, I mean, it's basically like game theory, right? Like assuming your opponent makes the best move possible, what would they do?
Right. And so the way that I like to do this is I put myself in the other team. And then I look at my matrix as a reference for what their matrix should look like. And I try to make the best decision for their team and then operate off of that. So when I was pairing for their team, Thousand Sons didn't have a bad matchup going into us. In our matrix, nobody was super confident in it, which means that they could save the Thousand Sons to play into whatever army and it would be fine. There wasn't any other army in this detachment or in this set of armies that wanted to be a defender except for potentially Imperial Knights, because they have the Field of Pains, they just have a lot of stat check type of stuff, and we aren't super confident into them except for maybe like 2 armies that we paired into.
So what do you look for in a defender army?
So the first thing I look for is if there's an army that really only has one bad matchup. If there's an army that has one bad matchup, I think they're a great defender, because even if everybody's on the same page, you and your opponent, the opposing team, they know that this army only has one bad matchup. So when you put it down, they're going to give you the bad matchup, and then they're going to give you a different army. You just take the different army. Unless that bad matchup is also a really bad matchup for the rest of the team, in which case you can get it out as soon as possible. But again, if everybody's on the same page, they're going to give you the bad matchup, they're going to give you something else, you take the something else, and it's totally fine. And that something else could also be a bad matchup for something else, or for another army in your team. So that's one of the ways you could look at it. Also, if your team has some like more inexperienced players that you know are going to have a hard time into a lot of these armies anyways, you can put them out there and just try to pull a bad matchup away from the team, and that's also something you could look at doing. If you have an army that doesn't have a good game anywhere. Like if I had brought Eldar, for example, most of these team compositions, I had no game into. So like I would have been first defender every single time just to try to pluck something out of the field.
Get a good pick.
again, that's why I didn't bring Eldar, but
Yeah.
something like that, right? Where if you have an army that has no game, put them out. If you have an army that only has one bad matchup, put them out.
Totally.
And the armies that have no bad matchups, or you think will have no bad matchups, you want to save, because it doesn't matter what they play into, they can do well, they can perform. So those types of armies you definitely want to save till the very end, either the ones that get forced into a pairing or as the last attacker into something else, because it also, if you can get them a good matchup, obviously get them a good matchup. If they can get like a 20-0 somewhere, definitely do that. But you're trying to set up armies for big wins is kind of the way that I look at it. So in our particular team composition, the biggest ones we want were Death Guard. Obviously, we want to have big wins, and we wanted Adrian's Guard list to get good wins as well. That was something we discussed as a team. So mostly, me, Jesse, who's playing Sisters, and Jason, who's playing Imperial Knights, we were kind of goalies, right? We're trying to make sure that our opponents can't score too much. We don't necessarily need to win our games. That's not really the point of why we're there. We're trying to set up 2 wins and then basically tie everywhere else, so that way we're up enough on the differential so we can win the round.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to get 5 wins. That's never the goal of a team. It's like,
Yeah.
you should try to
It
win
would be
5
nice,
games. Yeah,
but
of course,
be realistic, you know?
Be realistic.
And something to note there when you look at those armies and that breakdown there is like, particularly the Sisters and the Grey Knights, they're going to be a more all-arounder kind of forces that can kind of go into anything. They're more mission play, things that can kind of score regardless of their opponent, things like that. Whereas like the Guard, the Death Guard, and sometimes the Imperial Knights, it's going to be kind of skew and smash through. And it's obviously also affected by like player as well. But that's kind of like the thing there, right? Like, you guys will always have your tricks, you got your moves, your invuln, things like that. You have that flexibility, whereas the other list maybe want to just kind of bully someone with a bit more skew there.
Yep, 100%. And so if we go back to the actual pairings process, so my initial thought of if they defend with Imperial Knights, I had a plan for Adrian, regardless, was going to be the defender first. Because regardless of whether or not they defend with Imperial Knights or Thousand Suns, we can only have one defender. And we don't know who their defender is before we put ours out. So I had to make a plan around Adrian being the defender, and then having one of the 2 of theirs as the defender. So the plan I made for the Thousand Suns, this one didn't actually end up happening because they did defend with Imperial Knights first. I'm just going to pull it up because I have it on my phone. So
you figured the Thousand Suns were going to be... Go ahead.
Yeah. So my initial plan, so if they defended with the Thousand Suns, Adrian was going to be our defender regardless. Imperial Knights and the Death Watch were what I was saying was going to be their attackers. And then we would pick the Death Watch. So their first defender would be Thousand Suns. Then we would put me and Jesse into the Thousand Suns for the exact same reason that Adrian was just saying. We can just play the game. We can keep it a very similar score, like 10-10, 9-11, whatever, right? Even if we lose, it's not a huge loss.
Exactly.
So that was the first plan for them. Our second defender I had as our Death Guard, just because, again, it's one of those armies that we weren't really...
Wait, you didn't say who our first defender was.
You.
Yeah.
You were always
the
first.
say that.
Yeah, you were always the first defender.
Yeah, so we're putting me up as defender. We assumed that they would put...
This is if...
sorry.
You can put the second pairing.
Second pairing.
Yep. You can put the Thousand Suns because they're the first defender on the other team.
Okay.
So our attackers for the Thousand Suns was... where's Thousand Suns? Me and Jesse. So Grey Knights and Sisters.
Yeah. This is what you had?
This is not what ended up happening because they defended with Imperial Knights. But this was my initial plan.
Yeah, totally.
And then their attackers, and to you, I assumed they would put Imperial Knights and Death Watch.
Right.
Because they don't want to put the other armies there.
Yeah.
We would have taken, if that were to happen, we would have taken Death Watch. Just because we think it's a very good game for you. It's very hard for Death Watch to play into that many vehicles.
That's a big spike. So we would say, so the way it works is first you put your cards down and then you flip them over. So we put our guard down, flip it over, cool, and they would have put this card down, flip it over. Okay, we see these. Now we take 2, they put 2 cards forward, face down, we put 2 cards forward, face down, flip them at the same time, and we get the pick. So I would pick this, send the Knights back. And again, here we're looking to spike, right? Can my list take on Knights? Maybe. We saw the stream last week, maybe not. So we're saying, well, let's go for the big points here, push that differential. And then over here, what were we thinking?
They would have taken Grey Knights here. I have less units than Sisters, which means I have less assets. It's easier for them to play the game around the Grey Knights than it is Sisters. Obviously, I have the uppy downing and stuff, but their profile is actually really good into Grey Knights. So they would have taken Grey Knights here just to try to, again, limit the amount of impact that your game has on this game.
Sure.
And then following that, our second defender would have been Death Guard. And their second defender would have been Imperial Knights.
Right. defender.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then for us, they probably would have given their Grey Knights and their Chaos Knights. I guess they have to give Grey Knights, Chaos Knights. Those are the last 2 armies.
Yep.
And then we would have given obviously our last 2 armies.
Oh, they're gonna fight each other.
Yeah.
I think it's a win-win. And then these would go here.
Yep, exactly. And then for us, we would pick Grey Knights because there's just nothing that Grey Knights can realistically do into Death Guard. And then for them, I assume that they would have picked Sisters just to try to avoid the mirror match on Imperial Knights. Not that it's a bad matchup per se, but it's a very swingy and can be a very volatile matchup.
Yes. Someone was asking earlier about is there a reason to do mirrors and not mirrors?
Definitely.
Or reason to do mirrors. You know, Monica One had mentioned, yeah, I think Imperial Knights are a good example. If you are someone running like the Tropos and you have anti-tank, then it could be good going into Imperial Knights. Yeah, sometimes it just can be very swingy, right? There are some armies that when you match them against each other, you kind of expect it to be a tie. When there's things like Imperial Knights, big swingy dice, it could spike really hard, and you don't generally want to make your plan based off of swinging hard.
Yep.
But again, Knights are really strong. If you were worried about, if you didn't feel like anyone else had a chance against them, then you might also want to just force it and say, you know what, we're going to just kind of play for the tie there, get them out of the way. There's a couple of cases where you might want to go play for the mirror then.
Yeah, playing for a mirror to force a tie is sometimes just what you have to do.
Yeah.
Especially if the mirror is like Death Guard or Imperial Knights, where they're just hard matchups for a lot of people to handle.
Exactly. Put this on the bottom. There we go.
So that was my prediction.
Yeah.
If they had done Thousand Suns as their first defender. Now, as it stands, they didn't do that, which I think was probably a big mistake. I think, if they did Thousand Suns first defender, I think what they did was the mistake because it gave us way better matchups. So if we look at what we have here, we have Guard and Death Watch, which is good for us. We have Grey Knights into Thousand Suns, which is not good for us.
Yeah.
Death Guard into Grey Knights, good for us. Sisters and Imperial Knights, probably not great for us. And then Chaos Knights and Imperial Knights, I think we were advantaged there. But again, it's a very swingy, can be a very volatile game. So it was kind of like we weren't super sure, super confident into that one.
Yep.
Now, if we go back into what actually happened, we, again, still defended with Adrian because we had to.
Yeah.
And then they actually gave us Thousand Suns and Chaos Knights as defenders into Adrian.
Yeah.
And then their first defender, they had Imperial Knights, which is, again, what I had assumed would be one of their defenders, potential defenders.
Right.
And then into them, we put Death Guard and... You got to pull me out. We put Death Guard and we put Sisters.
Right.
And then they chose... what did they choose? They chose Death Guard into Imperial Knights.
Which is surprising.
Which is very surprising.
Like this was, again, a very anti-tank list. Shane couldn't make it day one because of house stuff. Everything's fine, but he was dealing with contractors and stuff like that. So we had Bridger, shockingly, first 40k event in years maybe, I don't know. So that was cool. So we had Bridger going to the Knights, which is a matchup we wanted.
Yep, which is a great matchup for us. You chose Thousand Suns, and the reason I had Adrian pick Thousand Suns here, Chaos Knights would have been fine. I think he could have gotten a great one into Chaos Knights. But also, again, for the same exact reason that we've been saying this whole time, it's just a very swingy matchup, and it could go either way. Yeah. And Thousand Suns was an army that not everybody was comfortable with.
Yeah.
So getting it out as the first pick meant that the rest of our pairings should have gone much, much easier because we don't have to worry about them anymore.
Exactly. I wasn't like, oh, this is like the perfect matchup, but like I felt more comfortable than others, and it was like, okay, would someone else be less happy with getting the Thousand Suns? The answer is yes. So let me just take this and see what we can do.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's also important to know, like, if you are the defender, if you're playing an army that, generally speaking, is the defender. Like, oftentimes, Custodes are defenders just because I think it's just, like, the archetype of the army and also, like, the players on the anvil, the waves will crash and it's going to all break the, I'll stop the flow of water or whatever. So if you are, generally speaking, the defender on your team most of the time and you're losing a lot of your games, that's fine. Defender's not supposed to win their games. Like, the first defender, most of the time, shouldn't win their games. Just because, again, if everybody's on the same page, you're going to get an unideal matchup.
Yeah, exactly.
So, like, it's okay to lose your games a lot as the first defender. Like, don't feel bad about that in any way. The whole point of the first defender is to try to limit the amount that your opponent can score, not necessarily get 20-0s or win big or whatever. If you are first defender and you get a 20-0, you guys did pairings phenomenally, and your opponent's probably less so.
Before we continue, I do want to give thank you to WM11 for becoming captain.
Hey,
Welcome. And then I want to thank T for the super chat. Adrian, is it true that if you're Little B's captain and Bridger is the opposing team, you'll always match them just to make Brian's life miserable? Oh yeah, for sure.
100%.
Well, like Brian said, like the confidence of the players matters a lot, you know. So if you can shake that confidence, that's great.
Yeah, on the psychological warfare. I'm devastated immediately.
It's so true. I just can't listen to what Bridger says.
Yeah.
It'll be like, 20-0 no matter what.
No matter what.
Cool. But thank you, folks. We appreciate it. Cool. What's up? Empinador Imperial. Here in Spain, team tournaments are more relevant than singles. There's definitely a growing culture of teams events, and as mentioned, it's kind of started overseas in Europe in particular, and very popular there. We really like it. I think it's probably my favorite way to play Warhammer, to be honest.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Hands down my favorite way to play Warhammer. It's just, it feels so much better being on a team, being able to contribute even when you lose. Like, that's not the only reason I like it. Obviously, you get to hang out with your friends all weekend, and you actually get to talk about games and do the whole strategy stuff, and like the actual just talking through of the pairings in general. So I genuinely love it.
Exactly. Excuse me. Cool.
And so the next up would be our second defender. So these are the matchups for the first two rounds. We had our sisters, so Jessie as a defender, and then for their defender they had Grey Knights, which again I think was a mistake on their end, but
interesting.
We'll get there in a second.
Yeah.
So for us, they gave us obviously the last two armies, so Chaos Knights and Death Watch, and then obviously Grey Knights and Imperial Knights. Now the reason I say that I think Grey Knights was a mistake is because either they're forced into a mirror match, which again for Grey Knights is not the end of the world. Like a mirror of Grey Knights is supposed to be like a 10-10. It should be like a 10-10. But Imperial Knights, obviously they'll just never take it. They will never take Imperial Knights as the Grey Knights player, so they're forced into the mirror match, no matter what happens, which again is a problem. So I think potentially they thought that we would put Grey Knights as a defender, which for the same reason we would never do, because either I'm forced into the mirror match, which we don't want.
Yeah.
So again, I think they probably should have defended with either Death Watch or Chaos Knights. That way they could have probably Chaos Knights, honestly.
It's so interesting because the Grey Knights, I feel like at this point didn't really have a great matchup.
They didn't. They did not have a great matchup, but theoretically they can play into Sisters. So if we can get them into Sisters, like I would have been happy to play into Sisters as a Grey Knights player.
Yeah.
And so again, if we're on the same page, the Grey Knights should also have been happy to play into Sisters. Now that said, I haven't played into the Sisters with Grey Knights with all the new points adjustments and the new updates from the balance data state, so maybe I'm wrong here. But either way, they took Grey Knights as the mirror match because again, they would never take Imperial Knights. So we mirrored Grey Knights.
Did they?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I played Grey Knights.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
What the heck?
Yeah. No, they picked Grey Knights.
Oh, I did play next to you.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then for us, we picked Chaos Knights.
Chaos Knights.
So the final matchup was Death Watch and Imperial Knights.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
And so this was the overall, this is how the pairings ended. And if, when I did this, and because again, like this was before we got to the table, this is how it all played out in my head, except for the Grey Knights. The defending with the Grey Knights was a little strange to me. But everything else lined up exactly kind of how I imagined it. And comparing that to the pairings matrix that we had good matchups everywhere, except for the Thousand Suns and Guard. Like everything else was fine. Like Imperial Knights into Death Watch is what we wanted. Sisters into Chaos Knights was something that we had planned for. Death Guard and Imperial Knights was great for us. Grey Knights into Grey Knights is a wash. And then your game was the only kind of unknown.
But this was also an intentional move on your part because you said, well, I actually, this is probably not a good thing, but I actually didn't have any reds in my matrix. You said, well, if there's no reds, then you should go first and be flexible depending on, we can see what their strategy is, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is how it ended up, and overall, we had a clean sweep here.
Yeah, it was great.
So we ended up winning this round 29. So they got 29 points, we got 71 points in the overall round. So we didn't lose a single game in this matchup. We did have two ties. So I tied the Grey Knights, of course, and then we had a tie with the Imperial Knights and Death Watch, but we won everywhere else.
Yeah.
So
absolutely killed it.
We crushed this round,
Yeah.
and I was super happy with the pairings process. And this instilled a lot of confidence in me, knowing that, like, okay, because again, I've only ever been attached to the captain doing the pairings. I've never actually done the pairings myself. So I was like, okay, I can actually do this. Now I feel much more confident in going into these further rounds.
That's where I was sold. I was like Brian just nailed it. He knew what he was doing. He had a plan. He knew where to like adjust it based off what they did. I was like, all right, I'm sold. Like Brian, you got this. And it was a very cool moment to be like, really have confidence in our team and everyone's ability to like estimate what they wanted to do. So that was great.
Yeah, it was super sick. So this was a great one. We were super happy. I was super happy with this, and everybody felt like we had good matchups going into it. Again, the Thousand Suns and guard matchup ended up being really great for you, actually. You had an 18-2, 19-1?
19-1.
19-1,
It was really great. He was newer to the army, I think, but I was able to sort of like, I won't go into too much of this because it's not a singles video, but like I really liked the list, and I was able to kind of like pressure him, force him to use his assets, and then like take him on with the tanks late game. I was worried about the output, but it was actually totally fine, totally reasonable, and just kind of tempoed it appropriately. And I could definitely kill the stuff. I knew I had no problem. So yeah, it worked out great.
Yep, it was sick.
So that was round one. Let's take a look at round two.
Oh, we should also mention there's only 4 rounds to this event. It was 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday. So it was
We love.
fantastic.
Actually, let me just make a copy of this. Yeah, we are a big fan of that. It's just much more comfortable for everyone involved, you know?
Yeah, we went and had dinner afterwards on Saturday.
Yeah.
And still got home at a reasonable time.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Which never happens when you play Warhammer.
So true. So let's take a look at
Round 2.
round 2. Also, I want to shout out all our opponents were fantastic.
Amazing opponents,
Really
yeah.
nice folks. We just had a great time. All right. So this, let me see what y'all see.
Can you see what I see? Cool.
Take us away.
So this was our round 2 pairing. Now, this one was a little bit messier for me as the captain trying to do the pairings because we got paired into a team during lunch, and so I was starting to do the whole process during lunch, and then we got back from lunch, found out that everything was repaired, and the round was starting in like 5 minutes.
Sucked.
So it really sucked because I had a plan for another team, and then this kind of was just thrown at us and was like, all right, now you got to figure this out. So I was kind of flustered, I would say. Overall, I think it still went very well for us, but well, let's just get into this. But so the plan here again was to have Jesse start as the, I shouldn't say again. So Jesse was going to be the defender here, and the reason being is he was confident into most of the things. Again, there was really only one thing he wasn't super happy with, which was going to be the Death Guard. But again, that was kind of the same story for the rest of us. Nobody wanted the Death Guard.
No.
And then their first defender actually ended up being the Chaos Marines, which again I'm not a super big fan of as their first defender. Second pairing.
Oh yeah.
And the reason I'm not a huge fan of it as the second defender is because Marines are pretty easy to kill. Now this list in particular was definitely tooled to kill Knights because it was like triple Vindicator and Forge Fiends and guns out the wazoo. But yeah, I think I would have much preferred to have seen even just Death Guard be defender, just for the same reason. Like there's not a bad matchup for him, and there's a lot of awkward matchups for this particular list, or even the Tyranids actually. The list they had was an invasion fleet with a bunch of big bugs.
Yeah, it was really cool.
So I think that could have also been a good defender for them, and I think that was actually what I talked about in my initial plan was either CSM or Tyranids. And the only reason I thought CSM is because I talked to the previous opponents that they had, and they said the defender was CSM first, and that was not even on my radar as something that they would put as the first defender until I was told that that's what they did.
Yeah.
But anyway, so for our 2 attackers that they gave us demons and Tyranids into sisters, and then
Gotcha.
and then we gave them Imperial Knights and Death Guard into Chaos Marines. Now again, this is kind of the thing that I've talked about before, where you can force matchups.
Yeah.
He would never take Death Guard in this instance.
Correct.
So we were forcing him into Imperial Knights, which is our Imperial Knights player wanted this matchup. He said he was happy to play into the Chaos Marines.
Yep,
so by
CSM.
putting Death Guard into Chaos Space Marines with Imperial Knights, we guarantee a good matchup for us. So either he takes Death Guard and we're happy. He'll never take Death Guard, so we guarantee he takes Imperial Knights. Either way, we're happy. So it forces him into a bad scenario, in which case, again, like I mentioned earlier, if you are the first defender, it's okay to lose your games. Because again, if the Matrix is the same on both of our ends, this is a bad matchup no matter which one he picks.
Right.
So for us, we ended up taking Chaos Demons into Sisters. And the reason we took Chaos Demons into Sisters is because we could play into Tyranids and it would have been fine.
Yeah.
We had other tools to deal with the Tyranids, and there was kind of awkward matchups for the Demons, so Jesse was like, all right, we'll do this. And for
There was a little confusion.
There was a little confusion. I don't know how he got confused. Everybody's on the same page except for Jesse, but we'll get to that in a second. The Chaos Marines ended up taking Imperial Knights, of course. They were never going to take Death Guard. And so those were our 2 matchups. One good for us, one kind of awkward, but still should be fine.
Yeah, it could go either way, but like our again, this is a case of like leaning on the player. Player was confident. We knew that the CSM could take down the Imperial Knights, one of the reasons that could do it, but they're pretty squishy. So, overall, slightly net positive.
Yep. And then for our second defender, we actually ended up putting Adrian down. The reason we didn't put me, I can't play into Death Guard, and I can't play into Black Templars.
Yep.
So I had 2 red matchups. That just cannot happen. Death Guard, again, because there's no bad matchups, we can put the Death Guard into wherever. So the next logical step for us is to put Guard into our defender's position. And then their defender was actually Tyranids.
Yep.
So, of course, the last 2 armies being Black Templars, Death Guard, which is what Adrian chose from, and then they chose between Grey Knights and Death Guard. And this is kind of another situation of they're forcing the pairing. Knowing that Black Templars could get sent back, I had Adrian take Black Templars, because if Black Templars get sent back, let me back up.
Yeah.
Putting myself in my opponent's shoes,
right.
As their captain. Grey Knights and Black Templars is like an auto loss for Grey Knights as like a 20-0, which means because these 2 armies could potentially get paired as like the leftovers, I needed Adrian to take Black Templars. That way, if they tried to send me back as the 5th and final pairing, I didn't get forced into Black Templars because that's a guaranteed loss. There's nothing I can do in that matchup, which I've played it many times, so I know there's nothing you can do in that matchup.
Exactly.
So Death Guard goes back as the 5th pairing, and then funny enough, they actually chose the Grey Knights with the Tyranids. So Death Guard versus Death Guard was the mirror, again, trying to probably limit the amount of damage that matchup could happen.
That's exactly what that was, right? And that's going to happen, and that's like a move to make. Like, you're not always going to get your ideal matchups. You're trying to either protect someone else or reduce the differential, and that's, I totally understand why they made that move at that point.
Yep. So, so this is how we ended up with our pairings. Overall, the round ended up much closer than the last one, probably a little bit too close for comfort, but we did end up winning 55-45. We took a loss in the Imperial Knights. It was an 8-12, and then I lost the Tyranids game 15-5, I believe. The turn I stepped out to do my damage, I did no damage. So we lost those games. Death Guard ended up winning. You ended up winning pretty big into the Guard, and then Sisters actually
lost.
Did he lose this game?
Against the Chaos Demons?
I think he tied this game.
He tied.
I think he tied this game. But either way, so off of the 2 big wins and then small losses, we were able to win around 55-45. So again, 2-0 at the end of day 1.
We're good.
Feeling great. We're in a great spot at this point.
It looks great. Let me get round 3.
Yep.
Let me get it all sorted out there. Get rid of these old teams. We don't need these teams. Time to fight. You can check in on chat while I'm doing the dishes.
Well, we're talking about medalist here. Oh, we're talking about Death Guard medalist.
Medalist?
Medalist, yeah, for the Death Guard.
Oh, Death Guard, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Death Guard was a huge problem at this event. It's like, actually, funny enough, Imperial Knights were a bigger problem at this event than Death Guard was. Because everybody probably had Death Guard, except for one team that we played, but everybody had Knights.
That's true.
Everybody had Knights.
Everyone had Knights. Yeah, although, I feel like there's more bad matchups into Death Guard than Knights, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because they're slightly untested.
Yeah, they're just pretty new.
I feel like I would rather fight Knights than Death Guard.
Yeah.
So here we are, round 3. We're in the 2-0 bracket.
Yep.
This is what we got.
Yeah, so this one, again, we had one matchup that we were kind of unsure of, which was the Necrons. It was a Star Shatter list that had a bunch of heavy destroyers. And while normally Imperial Knights could play into Necrons and be fine, Adrian normally could play into Death Guard and be fine, or it was Necrons and be fine.
Yeah.
It was just really weird because of the heavy destroyers that are just flat 6 damage. They're like AP4 or AP3 or something. Like, the damage is there and could spike in a turn, in which case it could just flip the game on a dime.
And they had a lot of trash that could also screen. Keep in mind, we're also looking at boards and deployment, so we knew this was Crucible. We knew that there was
also Purge the Foe, which means you have to kill and kill more, hold and hold more. Which, again, in a meta designed around killing, at the moment, it's a very scary place to be when you're going into a list that is designed to kill big things, and you have a lot of big things.
Exactly. Yeah. And they can outrange, frankly, both the Guard and the Imperial Knights. Here. So that was a concern going into this.
Yeah. So we needed to protect Adrian, and we needed to protect Imperial Knight or Jason or Imperial Knights player. So those two we definitely needed to pair for this round. So whenever I was doing the pairings, I had a conversation with Jesse, and me and him. We're okay getting into the Necrons pairings. It wasn't ideal. I have Dread Knights, of course, but the damage profile on the Heavy Destroyers are flat 6. I have 13 wounds on my Dread Knights, so it takes an entire squad of Heavy Destroyers to drop a Dread Knight if they want to do that, which, hitting, wounding, and I have a 4 vulnerable save, it's probably not going to happen that way.
Right.
So it takes at least 2 squads of the Heavy Destroyers to shoot into a Dread Knight to kill it, so I was okay with that kind of trade up, if you will. Jesse, same way. He's got a lot of units. They're all on 3 shots on those things. He was happy to take that matchup. But what did we do here? Knowing that we needed to protect Adrian from the Necrons, that was really his only uncertainty. We put him as the first defender. And because we put him as the first defender, of course they were going to force the Necron, or try to force the Necron pairing. So they gave him Necrons and they gave him Custodes.
Yes.
And again, this is another case of there's no world in which we take Necrons, and they know that. So they're forcing us into Custodes, which, again, kind of an awkward matchup, but not necessarily the worst thing, right?
Yeah, I would come to learn that they were playing a points scoring and a points denial game with the Custodes, where this was their tar pit list. This was their list that would score regardless of their opponent. They would take fixed objectives.
Oh, interesting.
And so it was very interesting. So at first I was like, what? And while it wasn't the best matchup, it made more sense after I had actually played the game. But anyways, yeah. So yeah, they obviously kicked this back.
Yeah, we kicked that back when we took the Custodes pairing. But for their first defender, they put down Imperial Knights, which I kind of figured they would do. Because if they didn't defend with Necrons, which I don't know why they would, it would have had to have been Imperial Knights. And we gave them Imperial Knights and Sisters as our 2 attackers. And they forced, actually, the Imperial Knights mirror match.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I didn't think that they would do this, just because, again, they have a higher potential with the Sisters, and this is kind of an awkward matchup. But they took the mirror match, which is fine. And then our second defender, again, Jesse was still kind of in the boat of, if they give me Necrons, I'll take Necrons. If they don't give me Necrons, I won't take Necrons. So he had the Sisters as defender, and then for them, they actually put Necrons as the defender.
Necrons.
So, again, I didn't super expect this one to happen. But we kind of planned for it anyways, because I was still in the pool to take on the Necrons. So me and Death Guard going into Necrons, they will never take Death Guard, so it forced them into me. And then obviously Dark Angels into Chaos Knights. We chose Chaos Knights for Jesse.
Yep. Boop. Again, trying to mitigate. They also had was this the Tyrant list, or was that the round before?
This was...
This is 3? Oh, this was Teddy.
This was Teddy. I don't remember what Teddy's list was.
Had it. Never mind. Yeah, anyways. So that's that.
Yeah, so we pushed Dark Angels back, knowing that they would take me over Death Guard, meaning we paired Death Guard into Dark Angels, kind of...
Which is good. That's what we liked.
Which is what we wanted, right? It's these matchups, again, we talked about all these matchups beforehand. If we can get Knights mirrored, then it's fine. We're not super happy with it, but, it's fine. Sisters into Chaos Knights we're good with. Me into Necrons is something we had talked about, just kind of blunting the blade there. Dark Angels into Death Guard, super happy with that matchup. And then, of course, you with the Custodes, again, kind of an awkward one, but we're pretty confident that you'd be able to do well here.
Yeah.
Now, this matchup ended, or this round ended very... as close as it could possibly be without being a tie. So we scored 53 points here, which is the minimum you need in a round to win. And so they scored 47 points. So this was by the skin of our teeth we were able to call this one out. Now, I will say it took us a very long time to set up all these tables. So we actually didn't start this round until probably an hour into it. After we set up the tables and after we did all of the the pairings and everything, and went over lists and deployed and everything. So we got called dice down while most of us were still playing our games. I was actually in turn 4 when they called dice down. So we didn't actually get to play turn 5, and I went second, and I had 4 Dread Knights on the table. So again, would have, could have, should have, right?
Yeah.
Should have just played faster. But, at the end of the day, that's what it is. So we ended up winning by the skin of our teeth here. So 53 to 47, which was making us the only undefeated team at the end of this round, going into round 4.
That means we win, right?
Oh, yeah. Definitely means we win. So going into round 4, this is the last pairings that we had done. And now this team was probably... this one had a lot of tough matchups for us, I would say.
Yeah, I think this was the hardest one to pair.
Yeah, we had a tough time. And this was less so just about me doing all the pairings. We had a lot, like the whole team had a lot of conversation about how we were going to approach this one because we didn't really have good answers for a lot of this stuff.
Exactly. Before we dive on into it, I do want to take the super chat from Digital Designer. Thank you. Seems like you both had a great time playing teams. Guess that means y'all will have to get to Nova a bit early so you can compete in teams there, winky face. I would love to, but then I wouldn't play singles. And their team's event is like one day, I think.
Yeah, it's just not.
It's just like, why? Why? I would rather play teams, but I'd also would like to play 2 days of Warhammer. I'm going to go all the way out for that, you know?
Yeah.
So.
But I'm also playing Lord of the Rings in Nova, so.
Yeah.
Can't do both. I'm not bringing out 2 armies.
Exactly.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So it goes. Thanks, Digital. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll see you there regardless. Cool.
So I think we start talking about this matchup with our problem childs.
Yes.
So the players on this team are phenomenal players, every single one of them.
Yeah.
The pilot of the Space Wolves, and he was actually running a Space Wolves detachment, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it was Stormlands.
Was it Stormlands? Okay, well, I guess I was mistaken. So he was playing Stormlands with Space Wolves, but it was Wolf Jail, but like an updated version of Wolf Jail. And Forrest, the pilot of the Space Wolves.
Great player.
And he takes every GT that he goes to basically as a win or
Great
second place. He's fantastic. The Necrons player, probably one of the better Necrons players in the area, Ulyss. Incredible player. So those two, and everybody on this team, like Billy on the Death Guard, or sorry, not Billy, Jimmy, on the Death Guard.
Jimmy Space?
Jimmy Space.
Wow, Jimmy Space.
And actually Alex Holly.
Yeah, our buddy Alex. Ended up on the other team. It's really funny.
And then I forget the name of the Custodius player, but I apologize. But again, he's around a lot of
I've seen him, but I've never
I've never actually played against him, but he's a great player also. So,
That's cool.
So all these matchups were very hard for me to wrap my brain around as to the best way to approach it.
Yeah.
We knew Space Wolves because one, it's a really hard matchup for a lot of us, but also because it's Forest, we didn't know how to stop him.
Yeah.
So no matter what happened, in my head, this is, and I mentioned this when we were talking the teams, like, we take the loss no matter what. I think no matter what happens, whoever goes into this army, we take the loss. It's just how can we limit the amount of points that Forest scores.
Yeah.
And so this whole pairings process was designed around making sure that Forest does not get into Adrian and does not get into Jason, our Imperial Knights player. After the round, I talked to Forest. He's like, yeah, there's nothing on your team that I was like not gonna win into. And we were like, no, we are fully aware of that, you know?
Exactly.
But again, it goes back to like the confidence of the player, right? Where he, after the fact, he's like, yeah, I could have played into anything and still done just as well.
That's true.
I was like, you are just a savant. I don't know.
But it's also like, you know, you took the list that he did to go, and I'm sure there were some matches that were tougher. I don't know, he actually lost round 1, so whatever that was, right? There's this whole gamut of things that you have to be prepared for, so it was nice for them to go into this matchup being like, cool, that's like a non-factor, right? And meanwhile, we were like, do we even have a chance with anything? And we were like, don't feel confident. So again, not betting on things that aren't sure. Right?
Yeah, 100%. So because we knew that we needed to keep Adrian safe from Space Wolves, but he also didn't want to go into, there's another army you didn't want to play into, if I'm not mistaken.
I think
it was the Custodians,
Yeah, the Custodes was a more aggressive Custodes list, and it was with more Wardens. I was worried about just getting bogged down, especially with Lions. They can get, and he had less units, more bricks, so +1 to wound against like all my vehicles. It was the kind of list that could just like tag me up basically.
So because Adrian had 2 really bad matchups that he didn't really want to go into, there's no way that I could ever justify starting him as defender, because again, if everybody's on the same page, they give him both of his bad matchups, and he's screwed no matter what happens.
If there's one bad matchup, it's fine. If there's 2 bad matchups, no, we gotta try to get them out of there.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And then, so we started with Jesse. And again, this is because we talked about either me or Jesse kind of face tanking the Space Wolves.
Yep.
And then for their first defender, they put down Necrons.
Ulyss. This was a cool
This was a
Star Shatter, Doomsday Arc kind of list.
Yeah, and a couple of Wraith bricks.
2 Wraith bricks.
It was insane.
Yeah.
So once we obviously saw the defenders, we knew that attacking, we actually attacked with me and Death Guard, so me and Shane were attackers into the Necrons. And then for Jesse, they gave him Space Wolves and they gave him T-Suns. And this actually kind of fit really well with what we wanted to do.
Yep.
Because again, we wanted to pull the Space Wolves out as soon as possible, so that way Adrian didn't have to play into them. So we took the Space Wolves matchup for Sisters, and then Thousand Suns went back to the pool. For them, we forced Grey Knights. So they chose Grey Knights over Death Guard, which was fine. Again, we had talked about this beforehand, so that way we could try to like get better matchups for the other 3 armies that are remaining. The second defender, we put down Adrian now because Custodes is the only one floating around, so he can play into whatever else and feel somewhat confident into.
Exactly.
Because again, he just would not take the Custodes if they gave him to him. For their second defender, they put down Death Guard, which means the 2 armies go to the other. Then for Adrian, we had him take the Thousand Suns just because he had success with it in the first round.
Yep.
So we're like, okay, we can do it again. Obviously you're not going to take Custodes, so
Definitely
that goes away.
Yeah. At that point, I felt like I knew the matchup a lot better. I was more confident.
And then for the Death Guard, they chose Imperial Knights, which again, they wanted to avoid the mirror. They wanted to try to score a bigger win, so obviously they're not going to take the mirror match.
Yep.
And then Death Guard Custodes ended up being the final pairing for us. Now overall, I would say I wasn't unhappy with these pairings because this is kind of exactly what we talked about going into round 4. Like this is what it needs to look like if we have a chance to win this game or to win the round. But we did have 2 bad matchups. So we had the Sister Space Wolves, of course, is going to be bad. This particular flavor of Necrons into my Grey Knights was not a good pairing or matchup, I would say, just because he had the Wraith Bricks that Grey Knights literally cannot kill. So I knew that I needed to limit the score as much as possible. Jesse needed to limit the score as much as possible, and we needed to push on the other 3 tables to get wins, obviously. So this ended, very, very, very close. And at this point, we're the only undefeated team going into round, only truly undefeated team. We're 3-0. There were 2 wins and a draw, so there were people that had no losses. But
they were undefeated.
We're the only truly undefeated team going into this round. Now, should we just talk about the scores? Let's do the scores.
Okay.
Because we'll just build some drama. Let me open this up really quick. All right, so
it was down to the wire.
Let's start with it's right here. So let's start with Adrian.
Okay.
Adrian, you scored 19 points in this game.
Yeah.
19-1. You absolutely crushed this matchup.
Thank you.
The Death Guard and Imperial Knights matchup, we ended up tying. So that was a 10-10.
10.
We'll go into the Death Guard Custodes. Now this one, Shane ended up actually losing 8-12, which is unfortunate. We obviously wanted to win here, but like, you know what happens. We're still playing a dice game at the end of the game, or at the end of the day, so it's totally fine. I ended up losing 13-7 to Euless. Yeah, not the best showing. I would say I was hoping for like a 9 or a 10, but again, such is life. And then last but certainly not least, this is what sent it over the edge. So Forrest into Jesse. Forrest got a 20-0 into Jesse. So Jesse scored no points, unfortunately, for the team. And because if you add all those points together, it was 44 for us, 56 for Forrest's team, which meant we lost the round by 4 points.
4 points.
4 points.
4 points.
If we had gotten those 4 points, we would have tied with their team, and we would have won the event because we would have been truly undefeated, 3 wins and a tie. But as it stands, we were 3 wins, 1 loss at the end of the tournament.
No, so close.
It was 4 points. 4 points.
Ah.
So, look, yeah, it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning with the pairings, though.
Yeah.
We got the stuff that we talked about that we wanted. We just needed to play the game collectively as a team better.
Yeah.
Like, there was things I could have done better. There were things that Shane could have done better. Obviously, Jason, Jesse, Adrian, too. Even though he got the 19-1, there was still that 1 point, right?
Yeah.
So there's always something you could have done. There's always, like, something to work on. But, I mean, honestly, though, at the end of the day, that's a great showing.
It was a great
For
showing.
us never have playing on a team together.
Yeah. No.
Me doing pairing solo for the first time.
Yeah.
Not doing an actual matrix that we probably should have done. Like,
yeah. We also kind of mostly played. No, I think we basically played the armies just that we wanted to play.
Yeah, 100%.
Like we didn't really take.
yeah, if we change the composition, right?
Yeah.
I don't take Grey Knights. I probably
not.
play like Space Marines or something.
Yeah.
Or even Chaos Knights or something.
Yeah, I think it would have been nice if we had a Chaos Knights, honestly.
Yeah.
Obviously, we had no Thousand Suns, so but we played what we wanted to play, and we obviously adjusted lists accordingly and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
we were super happy with it. We had a great time. Thank you, Vaught, for the gift of Tabletop Titans membership.
Thank you.
And welcome PFR Jolly to
welcome.
Titanhood. So it was a great time. It was a great time. So we ended up taking third in the
place,
event. We each got a set of train, which was awesome.
Yep.
And it was just a blast, honestly. It really, really was a ton of fun. Wild time.
It was a wild time, and honestly, I'm like super excited. This kind of got me like reinvigorated to do more team tournaments.
Yes.
Just because I haven't actually been to one in a little bit. And again, most of the time when I do it, I'm just kind of assisting with the pairings.
Yeah.
Or, like it's me and Jake, who's my captain. We just kind of like talk through pairings with one another. Like I'll be the opposing team, he's our team, and we do pairings against each other.
Yeah.
And that is honestly a really big help as well. So if you have somebody, if you are the captain and you have somebody that's willing to do pairings with you, just have them be the opposing team and then pair as if you were going to play into each other. And then you guys can get an idea of like, oh, this is actually what we should do if they do this thing, if they do this thing, or whatever. And you can kind of get a good sense of what needs to happen. But yeah, like I'm really happy with this result. 3-1.
That was great.
Great. Oh,
so fun.
I didn't even mention.
Yeah.
I guess I can mention it now, seeing as we've just finished.
Oh, yeah.
The reason pairings are so freaking important in teams. We had 20 games that we played collectively over the course of the weekend. We won less than half of our games, and we still almost won the event. So we won 8 out of our 20 games, and we were in third place, potentially. We were 4 points away from winning the event with only 8 wins under our belt.
Exactly.
Pairings are mega, mega, mega important, and they are more important than I can't even like. Until you,
it's everything.
Yeah, it's everything. Right?
It really, really is. You know, and then you can go in, you can play your game of Warhammer. It's going to generally fall within those bounds. It's getting those matchups and making sure that you play the rest of the game. You know, that's part of teams. Is there's this extra layer on top where you get to talk with your friends and figure out what to do, and it's super important. So, highly recommend. You know, take that time, learn that process. The best way to learn it, obviously, is just by actually doing it.
Yeah.
You know, we've done a fair few of these by this point, so we're more comfortable with it. But just go out there, just do it. You know, give it a try.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I definitely a shout out to Brian because the pairings were amazing.
This last round I was like, what do I do here?
It was really rough.
Because I didn't want, like, obviously, as the captain, there's a lot of stress to try to give everybody the matchup that they want, right? But as just a member of the team, just understand it's not possible. Like, it's not going to happen every time. Like, if you are like a list that's there to stunt somebody's score, you have to just kind of accept that that's what's going to happen. You're going to play into the bad matchups a lot of the time to try to stop them from scoring. Like, you have to just be okay with taking a bad matchup every now and again. And as the captain, be okay with giving a bad matchup every now and again. Like, you should have the conversation with your team. And set the expectation before the event of like, hey, are we actually trying to win? Are we just trying to have a good time? Like, what are we doing here? And then with that information, kind of make your game plan based off that. If you're trying to win, you can't worry about hurting people's feelings. You just have to do what's best for the team. And don't feel guilty for doing that, for sure.
Yeah, I 100% agree. As always, set those expectations. You can have a great time regardless, just as long as you're all in agreement. And it's kind of fun. It's kind of heroic. You know, you're like, all right, this person's going to jump on the grenade, and like they might surprise you and get more points than you think. And it's kind of turns what might just be a miserable kind of matchup into something kind of fun and heroic.
Yeah, I mean, Jesse jumped on this grenade for us.
For sure,
and we still almost won the round, you know? Like, that was super, super important.
Yeah. Because
it gave us better matchups in other places. Like, if I took the Space Wolves instead, I lose just as bad. I don't think it's a much better game. But, you know, maybe it throws off the rest of the pairings, so now we don't actually get what we thought we were going to get, and maybe we lose by much more, you know? So it does matter a lot.
Exactly. So that's teams.
That's teams.
If you have any questions, final questions, let us know now, because we're going to be signing off in just a minute. But yeah, just wanted to kind of give you a sense for, you know, what we know, what we've learned from it. I learned a lot. This is my first team with Brian, actually. So definitely cool to see, you know, how he approaches the team's process and everything. We're definitely going to be looking to play more teams events, things like that. I think there's like one more during the summer, and then there's obviously SoCal Open in the fall, which is a great time. We'd love to see you all there. And I don't know, it's just a good time.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Let us know, of course, if you enjoyed this episode, if you thought it was helpful. And don't forget, we do this every Thursday for the members, so consider becoming one so you can check it out. We also have a lot of other content. We have the Tuesday 40k games that we have y'all vote on, decide what you want to play on. We now have the post show for Trench Crusade, where we do all the campaign progression and wacky mini games that we have planned. We have our behind the scenes episodes. I'm forgetting another one. There's another thing we do. Anyway, there's another one I'm totally blanking on, but we do a bunch of content for members and all that stuff. I also want to conclude this vote, which I started much earlier. Have you played teams before? 67%, so 2/3 of people watching haven't played teams before.
Wow.
Get out there, give
Get
it a
out and
go.
play teams, yeah. Honestly, it's
Right?
the most fun you'll have playing Warhammer.
Yeah.
For all the reasons that we've already said, so I won't keep reiterating it, but you just got to do it.
Yeah.
It's a ton of fun, and don't be intimidated by it either, because like most of the teams that are there are just there to have a good time. You know,
So
there's a
true.
couple that are trying to win,
Yeah.
but everybody just wants to hang out with their friends and just
Yeah. It's so
Over
much
the
more
weekend.
chill. It's so fun.
yeah.
And I'm a big fan of less games a day too.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, the 2 and 2 was
It was great.
it was so
We
good.
actually got to like enjoy ourselves. By the third game, you're just like dead normally, you know?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And then you have to go back and do it again for another 2 days. Like,
Yeah.
no way.
Monikir one says, so when you guys going to run Tabletop Titans team tournament? 4 Ts. That would be cool. I definitely wouldn't say no to running events in the future.
Yeah, 100%.
But
I think it'll be a great time.
it'd be a fantastic time.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts? So, like, before we close it out specifically, as far as like our team composition goes, like obviously if we kept the same people,
Yeah.
what do
Totally.
you think for team composition? Just to get into the current meta, just to give like people that want to go to events, what kind of things should they run?
What should they run? Yeah, great question. So I think part of it is thinking about what is everyone else going to be running. So there are lots of knights, lots of Imperial Knights, lots of Chaos Knights. So definitely expect those to be out there. I will say our buddy Alex, who I played in the final round with his Thousand Sons, I think had a really rough weekend because he took a very like infantry combined arms kind of list.
Yep.
And in teams, even in the teams environment, it was really difficult for him to get good matchups. So keep that in mind when you're going in, knowing what people are going to be playing. You don't need to have lots of good matchups, but you need to make sure you have a good handful.
Yep.
One of the reasons we didn't have you play Eldar, as much as
Yeah.
you love the faction, I think that you would have had a worse time.
Yeah, so even, again, it's really important too, like, if you do have a few good matchups, if there are armies that people aren't going to play, then they're not good matchups, because
Yeah.
you'll just never see those armies, and anybody else can take those matchups anyways and do well. So, like,
Yeah.
if your only good matchups are into, like, Eldar, or, you know, AdMech, or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Probably look at potentially something else, or pivoting into a different archetype of your army, because those armies aren't very often taken, especially right now in the meta. Like, they're not going to be taken super much.
Yeah.
But yeah, it goes back to what Adrian's saying, just
Yeah, and absolutely. And then we're Ruben's saying in fives you want at least 3 take all comers list. Ricky's saying take all comers do kind of suffer in teams. I think you're both saying the same thing in this case. So you want take all comers in the sense that there are only 5 slots. You need to have a good spread of good matchups. Whereas in 8 you can have more bad matchups. But currently, the current meta, the take all comers list needs to be able to handle skew is the thing.
yeah.
You need to be able to deal with those big toughness, big knights, big monsters, things like that.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be uncommon to see Imperial Knights, Chaos Knights, and Death Guard all on the same team. Like, we
For
saw
sure.
that in our
Yeah.
in our event. So,
Exactly, and even like a Thousand Suns list that's more skew, you know, where it's like the 3 Mutalith Vortex Beasts, Magnus, things like that. Sorry, getting back to your question. I think Death Guard is great. I think Imperial Knights is great. I think the Guard was off meta, but also was pretty well suited. We did have to dodge a couple matchups, but I think going about Grey Knights.
yeah, I think Grey Knights would not have it.
What would you do instead of Grey Knights?
Given the matchups that I played into, I played in Necrons twice, which is not super great for Grey Knights, just because, again, the Wraith bricks are very hard for them to deal with.
Yeah.
But we didn't have people that really wanted to go into Necrons either, so I think Shane keeps screaming it, Thousand Sons. I think Thousand Sons is not a bad choice, but I also think Emperor's Children could potentially be good as well, because it does kind of fit that flex role where it can be more all-comers. It just needs to avoid like the big things, right? So potentially one of the Chaos factions is even CSM, just more guns, more better.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot Chaos summer for sure.
Yeah.
Like, we were talking about like what a great team list would be where it's like the 4th Legions and Chaos Knights. That'd be sick.
Yeah.
And then Sisters was fine. I honestly didn't feel too bad about Sisters, and I don't feel horrible about it. I was trying to get him to take Blood Angels, but again, you have to respect how your players feel about the game, because that's going to influence how they play the game, how they approach it. And Jesse was just not feeling like Blood Angels could hang, and regardless of if I feel like that's true or not, he needs to feel like that's true, right? So I had been pushing for him to do Blood Angels. But I think Sisters is a very flexible army. So, but yeah, I think honestly, like chaos heavy teams is where it's at right now.
Yeah, or even just like 4 Chaos and then Space Marines.
Yeah, Space Marine not bad.
Space Marine's not bad.
Yeah, back to that earlier point. Forrest lost to Ruben round 1. Ruben was running vehicles, Space Marines, Assault Centurions. You know, weird Ruben stuff.
Stop,
He's a madman. So that's a thing. And then Metal has said it's finding a team, coordinating schedules, etc. That's the hardest part of getting teams. Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%.
So that is the plus of five-person teams versus 8. It's easier to get together. And then, have we had Atlantic City? That just happened. It's coming up. Anyways, Frontline's starting to do things where they have like mercenary programs where you can just sign up as a mercenary to join a team.
Yeah.
Trying to like, make that process a bit easier because there is that awkwardness of like you don't have enough people or you have too many people, so someone's not going to be on the team.
Yep.
That's something that I think that people like Frontline can kind of culturally make it easier for people to get together and play, 4 games of Warhammer. So,
Yeah.
I feel you. Fantastic, folks. He made no saves round 1 and lost 12 cavalry.
Well, that's like all the Thunderwolf cavalry. He probably had 18, but like still, that's
a lot. Jesus.
The jail is no longer a jail at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. Is there any people like Scary that changed the Matrix decision tree for playing into?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely. Like Ruben is one of those players. Like it doesn't matter what Ruben plays. I mean, I'm pretty sure you're still on Team USA, but Ruben is Team USA, or was at least. I'm pretty sure he still is. But he definitely changes the Matrix. Like him playing Grey Knights versus me playing Grey Knights, not the same game.
Yeah, then I would take Grey Knights.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like whatever he plays, you take,
Yeah. Shane changes greens to yellows. We did have Bridger day 1, Shane day 2, so
Yeah.
100%. And that's what we mentioned a little bit at the beginning. Like broad matrices are great for getting started, and if you want a more relaxed environment, then do that. But theoretically, if you want the best possible matrix you can, you would tailor it to the exact people on that team, and their lists and their styles and things like that. So yeah, for
Forest is another one as well. Like I kind of touched on this earlier. Like with him with the Space Wolves, like normally probably not the end of the world. Like we could find a way to deal with it. Maybe it wouldn't have been a 20-0 if it wasn't Forest, but because it was Forest, he changed the whole game plan, right? And because it was Euless, he changed the plan for the Necrons. Like because it was these players, knowing their faction, they are like diehard on these factions. They only play these factions. Like it definitely changes the way that you approach it.
Absolutely. All right, folks, with that, we got to get some lunch before we play our game. Today, I'm playing the brand new Space Wolves Gladius today. I know.
Gross.
It's going to be pretty gross, but I'm excited. We got all the new characters and new stuff. It's going to be great. Join us for that at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Tomorrow is, of course, episode 2 of Trench Crusade. We have the public debut of the game during 12 p.m. Pacific Standard, and then an hour later, we'll have the post-game recap just for the members. So if you're interested, become a member today. It's been an absolute blast, and we've got lots and lots and lots of content coming up soon. With that, folks, really appreciate y'all taking the time hanging out with us for this last, hour, 20 minutes, talking teams. Well, that's going to do it for us. We'll catch y'all next time on the tabletop. Bye.